There we are. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Social Media Accessibility, hosted by Department of Disabilities Assistive Technology Program, the IT Accessibility Initiative, of which I am the director of. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm just going to go through the usual housekeeping items. We have captioning available today. So if you would like it, you can enable it with the closed captioning button on your menu ribbon. Webinar is being recorded. It will be posted to our YouTube channel within a couple of days. So either Friday or Monday this week, Friday this week or Monday next week. If you have questions during the webinar, please feel free to put them in chat or Q&A. I will try to address them as we go along, and if I don't get to them during the presentation, we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. With that, our goals today are to talk a little bit about the importance of making your content accessible on social media, talk a bit about the universal needs, the basic things that you should do with pretty much any social media platform. I'm not really going to get into specifics today, since by and large, most platforms nowadays have all the same capabilities. There are a few little minor things here or there to consider, but in general, we're going to be just discussing the main ways to make sure that your content is accessible and that your message is reaching the majority or as many users as possible. So with that, let's talk a little bit about the importance of accessible content. Why are we doing this? The first reason is, according to Pew Research in 2021, roughly under half of Americans, 48%, get their news from social media sites sometimes or often. So this means that uh, most people will first hear about something through social media. They might go learn more about it from a news site like New York Times or Washington Post or somewhere else later, or they might go to those sites to actually learn what happened. But the first time they hear about something, it's either from somewhere like Twitter or Facebook or Reddit, anything like that. So it's the primary method for a lot of people in the States for just hearing about events. Second point is, roughly a quarter of the population, 1 in 4 adults in the US, have some form of disability, according to the CDC as of 2023, so last year. Now, this includes the entire, or the majority of the categories of disabilities. So you have mobility, you have cognitive, you have physical disabilities, you have blindness and visual impairments, you have hearing loss, you have neurological or speech disabilities. All of those are inside this category. So it is a wide range, but your audience is a representation of that. So you have to keep in mind that there are more people out there that this is going to impact than you think. And in some cases, it's going to just make it a better experience for everyone in general anyway. This third point for this is that those with disabilities may be up to 20% less likely to use technology, again, from Pew Research. That is primarily due to the fact that they're having bad experiences, inaccessible websites, having trouble with technology that's not working with assistive technology, to trying to get information on social media and it not being uh, written correctly for them, so that they're missing critical information that someone else can get just because they don't have sight, or because it's organized poorly, or it's using a lot of emojis and that's interrupting their reading. Any of these kind of things can interfere with it and drive them away. And the final point here, the reason that we're considering this and doing this, is because just over half of respondents to the WebAIM 2021 screen reader survey, 53%, consider social media only somewhat accessible. A lot of this is out of your hands. You have no say in what Twitter does for accessibility, what Facebook does, YouTube, but you still have a responsibility for your content, what you're putting on there. At the very least, by doing so, you're at least engaging this audience, and you're trying to build trust with them, versus the platform might be problematic. So we're trying to meet them halfway as they're trying to come to us. Social media is a two-way street. It's interacting with your constituents, with your audience, with other businesses, all of these things. So we need to make sure that we're reaching out as well as them following us. Some of the challenges that inaccessible media poses to people is the first one, and the one I consider the most important, is lacking important information. If you're putting out a message about an event next week that you're hosting, and you put like the date and time in an image, but not in the text, someone who's using a screen reader and you don't have it in the description, someone in the screen reader doesn't know when that event is happening. They just know it's coming because you might have put the title in your post, or there's like critical information on the flyer about the location. Where do they go to the event? And if they can't get to it because that PDF is not tagged, well, now they're not getting that. This is especially true for time sensitive announcements. If something happens in a neighborhood, like a fire, or a water main break or something like that, and you're posting about it on social media, and that information goes out uh, in uh, uh, an announcement, a video announcement, but you don't have captioning on it, someone who's deaf or hard of hearing sees that there's an announcement but doesn't know what it's exactly saying, or is struggling to try and get information from it because what the person is saying is additional details in addition to the text, and they can only read the text. And so they're missing out on stuff, especially something that's like it's happening right now and it might impact me. So that is the first thing, is that there's information not getting across to the user. Second thing is that having inaccessible media causes confusing context or potential misinterpretation of information. Again, if you're putting out an announcement about a new service and what that service does, but you have some of the information in an infographic, that it's really detailed, very pretty, but that information isn't readable by, again, a screen reader, or if it's posted without any like text description or context, it's just the infographic. Um, that's leaving the user having to make connections to outside information. Um, and sometimes that leads them to think it means something different. Other times it's a misinterpretation and they think something's happening when it's not. So keep that in mind of when you're posting, is that yes, a lot of our users can make those kind of connections, but we really want to make this easier for them, make the experience better. That leads into the third point of the frustrating experience of not gaining that information, or having constantly confusing context or missing things because it's not presented in a manner they can consume, leads to avoidance. I'm sure everyone here today can think about a time when they went to a website or something, got annoyed by it being slow or not responsive, or trying to find how to register for something and having to click through like 5 or 6 menus, and ultimately deciding I'm just not going to bother. And it's even worse for when it's inaccessible, because it's not just, oh, it's taking me a while to do this. Now it's, I can't do this because this button is not working. It's not telling me where I need to go. It's not telling me what's happening. I've clicked submit, but did it actually go through? I don't know. It didn't tell me. So that's the kind of things that we need to consider here, is the the more annoying this is, the more likely they are to avoid it. Going back to that statistic about being less likely to use technology, this is why, because ultimately it's just causing more and more stress. And that leads to a lack of social involvement. So now you have a population that's not engaging with government services. If you are a state or local agency here, university, your students are not getting information that they need, maybe, or their parents not showing up to events because they're not getting information about it. Um, it can also be critical in some situations. COVID is an example I like to point to for this because information about COVID when it first hit in 2020 was coming rapidly. Everyone's trying to get out as much information as possible, how to protect yourself from the disease, what's going on, what's being done, and a lot of work went into making that information accessible, but there was a bit of lag time. And if that had gotten worse, or if information was published and not made accessible either initially or like immediately after, you had a vulnerable population. Um, you know, uh, Screen reader users were not able to find where vaccine sites were or testing sites. Someone who's deaf or hard of hearing watching the press release is not learning about the new initiatives that are being taken or where they can actually go to look up where testing sites are. Someone who is in a wheelchair, is homebound, isn't able to learn about the resources that can be potentially delivered to them for these kinds of things. So we're creating vulnerabilities in populations that are clamoring to be a part of this. They want that interaction. They want to use these services. In some cases they need to. And by creating these blockers or not addressing these blockers when we become aware of them quickly, we lose that trust or lose that efforts we're building towards uh, having that strong interaction with these populations. So to make sure that we're addressing these things, here are some initial considerations as you're drafting your social media and you're managing your posts. Um, don't worry about going back to fix older things. Ultimately, everyone's attention span at this day and age, unless they're going back to try and find something very specific, it is limited. So it's more important that we start doing these going forward and we make sure that we're adhering to these best practices as we go along. um, if you're posting other information or if you have like a flyer or something, yeah, take the time to go fix it, especially if it's something relevant that just happened or something. But don't go back a year and try to fix things from there. So here's the starting considerations to work with. First off, provide descriptions for images and other non-text content. Guideline one of pretty much any accessibility talk ever: alternate text for images. Second thing is use descriptors for link types. This is especially useful if you're using like a URL shortener like bit.ly, because in those cases, usually you can't get any idea of where the link actually goes from the URL itself. So telling people where this is going to go, such as going to a video or if this is to a picture or it goes to a web page, is really useful because then we know what's going to happen when we click that link. Uh, addition to that, you want to try and keep links and other information to the end of the post, partially because it can cause intermittent reading. Uh, if in some cases, assistive technology will read the text and then stop, and another input will read the link and then stop and then read the text afterwards. Um, some don't do that depending on the input method done, but it can also interfere. And then someone with a reading disability like dyslexia or something, or color contrast issues, or someone who's colorblind or is using color inversion. Um, Sometimes that can cause issues with determining where the link is, what's part of it, that kind of thing. So generally, it just makes it a smoother experience to group them up at the end. Same for hashtags, because the hashtags in the middle of paragraphs and such can cause that same issue of start, stop. And it can be really annoying for users, or in some cases, it can interfere with their ability to understand the content because they're having to discern this as separate from the text. Same with emojis. Emojis are especially egregious with this because since they act as an image or an icon, they are almost always read separately. And typically they'll have a separate description. So now it's not just, reading a sentence, saying, check out accessible social media here. It, a hashtag that will read, check out number sign accessible social media or hashtag accessible social media here or something. But if you have emojis, now it's going to say, check out smiley face, hashtag accessible social media, thumbs up here. And that can make it harder to understand what the message is. Again, trying to just make the experience better. Most of these users will be able to understand what the message is and they'll be able to sift through the information on their own. But we want to limit the potential for misinterpretation. Regarding hashtags, you also want to use camel case for them. So capitalizing the first letter of each word makes it just generally easier to read. So example on screen is hashtag accessible social media with A, S, and M capitalized. I personally have not been diagnosed with a disability or have not self-diagnosed with a disability, but I can say that's easier to read just for myself. So someone with dyslexia or another issue or for a screen reader, it's going to pick that up and read it a lot better because we've taken just that extra second or two to capitalize each letter or capitalize each first letter of each word. And then finally, when you're posting any like video or audio content or any publications like a Word doc or a PDF or any kind of flyer like that, follow the good general accessibility guidelines regarding those. Um, they contain kind of the same things here, all that information we just read off, but there's some other additional considerations, and we'll talk a bit more about those later. Now let's talk about image descriptions in a bit more depth. This is something I am planning to really deep dive into later in the summer, but here is the short version of good practices for image descriptions. You want to keep it concise, make it direct. You want to avoid interpretation. You're really just conveying the subject of the picture to the user. You don't want to put any like subjective judgment into it. Is this good? Is this bad? Is this, you know, uh, what are they doing? I think they're doing this. Well, it should not be a guess. It should simply be this is what this is, and consider the context of how you're posting it in this. You also don't want to use picture or image of because assistive technology is going to tell the user that. Screen readers will say, this is the graphic, here's the description. Voice control, when a user is filtering through elements on the page, is going to divvy this out into the graphic section and point that out to them. So you can rely on the user's tools to tell them what this is, what this is not. The only caveat I would have to this is it a specific type of shot, like a headshot or a panorama? And in those cases, it might be worthwhile telling people that's what this is because users might or probably will know what that type of shot means, like panorama of the key bridge collapse. Something like that is going to be understood to be this is a wide shot containing the entire bridge. A headshot of Stephen Polacek here. People understand that that means that this is from top of the shoulders up. This is really just my face for the purposes of identifying me. So in those cases you can use that, but other than that, you don't want to tell people image, graphic, picture, because software will do that for them. And then finally, complicated images like infographics should link to a text version. So a lot of the times the infographics contain too much information for a description, um, or it's going to be, this multi-paragraph description that a user can't stop and start or restart in the middle, or, go back and read like the last word or two or paragraph or sentence. Instead, it has to read it all in one go. So in general, it's better to send them somewhere else to get that information, maybe in a more accessible manner, like a table or a text-only description or something, and let them know that that's available as an option to them. Let them decide what is the best method for them to consume it, but make sure that that method exists. So the example I have on screen here is from the Tortoise Help Center on how to add description to a photo as you make a post. The picture is of a coffee cup with just some coffee in it. And the description they've written in is a small white mug with a tiny loop handle with a shot of deep brown espresso and a light brown crema on top. The mug sits on a small white saucer on a medium brown wooden table. It's 178 characters. They offer a limit of 1,000. That's a lot. That is too much. Honestly, this description I would consider a little too long. Um, if someone put this in and this was simply, this is what they're posting, I wouldn't fault them for it. It's a good description. You've conveyed everything that's in the image, but the context might change that. So if a coffee shop is posting this image, they're going to want to talk about their product, the actual coffee. So they're not going to talk about the table or even the mug. They're going to say shot of deep brown espresso and a light brown crema on top. They just need that part because that's really what they're trying to convey to people. They might say a mug of coffee, but they don't need the details of the handle or the saucer or anything like that. Conversely, if this was from a furniture company or somewhere like Target or Walmart, they might be talking about the cup instead because that's the product they're selling. So they're going to say small white mug with a small white saucer containing coffee or containing espresso, something like that. So consider that's how your context changes the description because it's really going to be mattering what you're trying to convey to people. What are you doing with this? In this case, the image I have, the description there is the Twitter's help center description of adding an image description to an image in a post or something like that. Because I have obviously a screenshot of the whole thing, but I didn't say screenshot because that's kind of implied by the description, and generally that's not the point of it. The image itself is an image. I don't need to explain that. Um, the other things I would say that maybe aren't necessary are things like the wooden table, because I can't actually tell that's a table. You don't have the entire table in the picture. You really just have the top or a small subsection of it. And it's just generally not a useful detail. That's when we start getting into too much information. It's a fine line. So that's why I said I wouldn't really fault someone for putting this, but I might say, hey, next time consider paring this down to what is most relevant to your post. I hope that makes sense to people. It's tricky writing alt text, and that's why I'm planning to do a larger webinar on it, and hopefully I'll see you guys there. So if you have questions about this, please let me know. Now for emojis and icons, it's a bit different because typically you can't add descriptions to those. So you want to check the one that comes with it. Usually it's part of the file name. If you hover over it and you get the little tooltip, usually it'll say something like smiley face or thumbs up, thumbs down, but sometimes that's not going to match your intention, you know, or in some cases, you've seen like the thumbs up with different skin colors. Make sure it's going to read as the one you want people to think about. It's really just making sure that it matches your intention and your message. Um, Again, don't overuse them. As I said before, it interrupts the message. If you recall that meme from a few years ago where it was, word, clap, word, clap, word, clap, that can be really annoying with a screen reader because you're getting that interruption every single word, and it really interrupts the flow of the reading, especially because in some cases it either pauses each time. So to get through, a 6-word sentence, I have to press, 6 times instead of once, or it's, you're having to separate out that description from the actual sentence. And I can do it, but really, guys, that's the kind of reaction you want to avoid. So it's best to either group them together at the end of a sentence or at the end of the post itself. It's consider where it's going to have impact, where a person's going to read it. And, you can put it at the start of a sentence too, just don't put it in the middle. Try to avoid that if at all possible. Now, link descriptions, going into this, there's two typical ways we see links used in social media. Usually it's a shortened URL. In cases like Facebook where you can't post a URL, a lot of people use something like bit.ly to shorten it, which is great. It's a lot easier to use that instead of a long string that's 30 characters after the main homepage. But um, part of the challenge here is that usually those don't have any kind of identifier to them. Uh, Sometimes you can do so. Bitly has that customization if you pay for it, and if you can, great, do that because you can give information and clues as to where this is going, uh, such as the example. This isn't a link, don't click it. But the example is bit.ly/ITAI webinar playlist. You know, the idea of, you can go visit our previous webinars here. But uh, you have to pay for that customization. If you can't do that, and instead it's just a string of numbers and letters, like the second example I have on there, 1238 AFGB3, doesn't tell me where it's going. So I need to use context to describe the purpose. I need to tell people what's going to happen when they click this link. So that's where having that identifier, that tag and brackets. So in this case, the example, join us at our webinar, brackets, web page, and then following with the link. User can read that whole sentence. They'll hear, okay, this link is going to take me to the registration for this webinar at a web page outside of the platform. I know what's going to happen. I know where I'm going. I feel confident in clicking this. The second way is hyperlinking the actual text, so descriptive text. You want to avoid using things like click here or use this link because those kind of things can show up a lot online, especially, in someone's, user feed. And so now there's, 16, 20, 30 links saying click here with no identifier. If they're just searching through links to see what's going on, there's 30 links that say click here. They don't know which one does what, and they're going to have to rely on context. Again, just making it easier for users by, excuse me, making it easier for users by giving them information that they can sift through quickly and efficiently instead of having to go find a link, then go back out of it to try and find surrounding context and make sure it's the right context. Because if there's 3 links on there that say click here, and they go to the second one and read downwards instead of upwards, then they're going to read the descriptor for the third link, come back to it and think, oh, it goes to this one, click it, and then be somewhere they didn't want to be. You also want to avoid using a single word or just 2 words like click here because it's harder to press that on like your phone on you know your uh, your phone screen or your tablet or something, or even sometimes on desktop. One word is a little bit harder for touch targeting, especially if it's like 3 or 4 letters like link is. And by using the entire phrase, we create more of a target, so we can avoid having to do that zoom in and then try and press the right link and that kind of thing. Make it easier for your users. So use a phrase for both clarity and touch targeting. Example here is join us at our brackets webpage social media webinar on Wednesday, 6/21, with the brackets webpage and social media webinar being the link itself. That's the minimum. I could have used the entire phrase as the link, and that would have been great. It would have been, ideal because it would have had all the information together in one spot. But at the very least here, I've told people this link goes to a web page about a social media webinar. I know where it's going and I know what it's going to. That is enough. The reason that we could use the entire phrase is because then it would contain all the information in a single go. It doesn't mean you want to use like entire sentences as links. That can be too much. But you want, generally, I would say a short phrase, 3 words or so, and the type of link as well, so that users understand where they're going. Are they going to a video? Are they going to a web page? Give them just that extra little bit of context to make sure that they get what they want. Now, with videos and audio, I'm mostly going to talk about synchronous media, so videos with audio attached to them, um, because honestly, that's the most prevalent version you see online. It's rare to see video only content or audio only content anymore, unless it's something like a podcast or it's a live feed from a personal webinar or a personal user, that kind of thing. But the general rules for those kinds of content are largely the same. They really just need a text equivalent with a description. In the case of synchronous media, there's three things you need to have. The first is accurate captioning. Second is sufficient audio description. And the third, largely if possible, is a compliant player with properly labeled controls. That third one is going to be a little bit more outside of your control because there's only so many options you have online and you can't really do much to edit them. But it is something to be aware of and try and choose one that's at least usable and maybe direct people to other places if you can't. Or make sure you have an alternative method. So I'm going to go into more detail about all of these as we go along, but these are your kind of three rules for pre-recorded media. Now, just for a quick show of how this works, this is our AT plain and simple video. Hopefully it plays.
We all like to do things like read, use the computer, cook our own food, or even play video games.
So first 6 seconds, we have our captioning here. Completely matches our voiceover. So someone who can't hear gets the exact same information as someone who can't see, as someone who can do both. So it matches completely with our icons. We have, reading a book. We have using the computer. We have cooking our own food, and we have a controller for video games. There's no text on screen, so we definitely need the captioning enabled and available to people. Um, and then we are using YouTube, which, due to its prevalence, it's really hard to avoid. But thankfully, YouTube is decent. You'll hear a lot of different opinions about it, but I will say that at the very least, it is usable, and most users with disabilities are going to at least know how to work with it. So let's start with captioning then. Here are the guidelines for good captioning. First off is use proper grammar and syntax for the language. It adds a lot of context and a lot of information that straight subtitles might not have, because subtitles are really just a transcript of what's being said. Um, the joking version you probably have seen online or in English class is "let's eat, comma grandma" versus "let's eat grandma." They can mean different things. So having proper grammar and syntax in the captions makes sure that users get the intention and not just the words. Um, if you're doing an interview, or in the case of like a public presentation like this one, you want to fully name the speaker on the first appearance. Our captioner today put my name at the start. Since I'm the only speaker, my name will not show up anymore. But if there was another speaker joining me today, that person would have been named when they spoke. And then each time it switches to the other speaker, that person's first name is going to appear. You don't have to use the full name each time, but you do need to identify who is speaking at what time. Usually comes up in interviews or presentations. If you're doing a voiceover, just for like a PSA or something, or like our plain and simple video there, you don't need to do that. It's only if the speaker is actually relevant to uh, the, the presentation. Captions should also have any relevant audible details, such as effects and music that are needed for subject comprehension, that they must be mentioned. So easy example is a PSA about fire alarms. If you're talking about, how to set one up and test it, you have, on screen, you have the image of the person pushing the test button and then the light showing up and you'll hear the beeping, but the captions should state, you know, fire alarm will beep 3 times and then initiate test, or fire alarm beeps 3 times and then that's followed by you know loud alert or long uh, screech or something like that. The idea is that since that's a very relevant detail that we're trying to communicate to our users, that it will beep 3 times when we press the button, it needs to be in the captioning as well. So, I'm sure the voiceover would probably say it too, but making sure that not just the speech has it, but the action has it as well. It reinforces it in people's minds and then makes it available to people who are might not be able to get it in another way. Final detail of captioning is that AI generated captions are generally not sufficient. I would estimate them to be about 80% accurate when they are first made, but they tend to struggle with people's names or proper nouns or acronyms. So keep that in mind, and it will almost always lack grammar and syntax. They are getting better. I mean, they're constantly trying to improve these things. I'm sure you've seen online news articles about new features added to YouTube for AI generated captions. Zoom itself has done work on it. Um, Microsoft Teams, all of them now have the capacity to like associate your account. So like if I had automated captions, you would see my icon next to the captions for when I'm speaking, things like that. But they they aren't 100% accurate from the get-go. And since you're, recording this and then posting it, you have the time. So make sure to go make them 100% accurate. Make sure that your message has zero chance, or at least a minimal chance, of being misinterpreted or missing information that's crucial. Now, it doesn't mean you can't use them. Like, go ahead and have YouTube generate the captions for you because they are a good starting base. It saves you a lot of work when you're going to make these adjustments and make these changes. Um, if you don't have a transcript to copy paste from, or if you haven't done any of the captioning or don't have a captioning file from the content creator, then yeah, it saves you a lot of time because it'll take it only a couple minutes to generate those. And then it'll probably only take you a few minutes to go and edit them and make sure all the words right and add some grammar, add punctuation, those kinds of things. It's not going to have the audible details, sound effects and such. You might want to throw that in too. So just take those extra few minutes to generate those and then fix them up. Make sure they 100% match and you're good to go. Audio description is a bit different and it's a bit challenging in this format. There's two forms of audio description. The first is a separate track that's played concurrently. That typically is seen in television and film. It's also possible in theater. Theaters usually have the ability to ask for like a headset with audio description, and it'll either be pre-recorded or in some cases it'll be connected to a microphone and someone else is describing what's happening as they watch the show. So that's the first way, but it's not very common with social media because those shorter videos, it's extremely difficult to get like any of those details into the video in time or between voiceover. So that's where narrative language, the second option, into play. It's a better approach for shorter videos. Narrative language is making sure that what you're saying matches what happens on screen. So that way we don't have to worry about pausing and filling in time, or in some cases, not getting across the information we want to, or not having any kind of description and having that disjunction between screen and voice. But the big thing with audio description is that any visible content that is necessary for comprehension must be audio described. That's the standard. So to do that, we want to make sure that we use specific language that describes our actions or our comparisons. So example, first is click the more information link located on the navigation menu under Contact Us to find other projects from our agency. By saying this, and you can imagine on screen the mouse is moving up to the top right, clicking a drop down menu that opens up, and then there's a series of links, and then it goes down to more information and clicks it. By saying that as the action occurs, I am one, making sure that someone who is blind, or maybe even someone who's just alt tabbed and writing out or following along, is on your website and trying to find it on their own. They don't have to actually see the action. They can hear where they're going, the navigation menu, and a reference point, contact us. They can look through the list. If they see contact us first, they understand the next link is the one I want, more information. If I simply said, click here at the top to learn more about other projects, top of what? Top of the website, top of the main region, top of the navigation menu, or do you mean the submenu to the left? Because some websites have a list of links on the left for the state. I'm creating more guesswork on the user's end. They might, come back to the video, stop it, back it up. If it's a live presentation, they're going to have to try and find it, as we're talking more. They might not be paying attention to the rest of the presentation, lose information. So this way, I'm reinforcing it for those who are watching and listening. I'm making sure that those watching and can't listen uh, still see the action and still see what happens. The captions also make sure that it describes what's happening to them. And then someone who can't see it, either because they're looking at another screen or they have a visual impairment, they're zoomed in and their magnification isn't quite keeping up with the video, they still will hear the same information. So making sure that it's presented in multiple ways so no one misses out. Example two, in 2020, 300 constituents were served. That number rose to 645 in 2021. On screen is a chart showing increase in constituents and phone calls over time. This came from another example that's very similar, where you have, let's say, a line graph on screen that shows, a change in the number of constituents that an agency has helped over the course of, let's say, 5 years. The voiceover is going to explain the most relevant details. It doesn't need to spend all this extra time of describing, the X axis, the Y axis, every single stop. It's really focusing on what is the detail being presented, the 2020 number and the 2021 number, and this is the difference. If instead the voiceover and simply said, between 20 and 2021, we doubled the number of constituents we helped. Okay, great. Visually, I can see that you went from 300 to 645. But if someone who can't see it or is again alt tabbed and taking notes on their own, all I hear is doubled the number. Did they double five? Did they double 1,000? I don't know, and I had to try and find that information elsewhere or go back and replay the video, and it again reduces that uh, interest level that the person attending or listening has in your subject. So using that specific language to mirror what's happening on screen, make sure that everyone gets the same information, it's reinforced in their heads, and they don't have to try and find that information again on their own. Now, video players. This is a challenging aspect of making video and audio accessible. There's only so much we can do. YouTube's prevalence means it's largely unavoidable. Pretty much everyone's posting things to YouTube. We do it, every other state does it, the federal government does it, agencies do it, businesses do it, people do it. It's going to end up on YouTube. YouTube isn't bad. They have made significant improvements in their accessibility over the last 5 years. There are always, more to do. The controls, you'll hear arguments online of, are they good, are they bad? But in general, they're usable. The big thing with YouTube is they don't provide the ability for an audio description track. It requires narrative language. If you want to do an audio description track, you can, but you have to upload a second version. And then you're kind of at the whims of the algorithm of which version shows up in people's feeds, or do they have to actually go find it, that kind of thing. So that is a limitation. You can't alter the captions on YouTube. and some of the controls might be hidden in settings or whatever. So there are some improvements still to make, but by and large, it's workable, and most people are not going to give you trouble over it. If for whatever reason you do want to provide a fully accessible version or audio description track at the same time, you might want to consider using a different version hosted on your website where you have full control over that and alert people to this is where you can go for this version. If you do that, I would suggest you looking into Able Player. It's an accessible HTML5 media player fully designed for that purpose. Um, it supports a lot of extra options that will be great for your users, including customization of captions. So they can change the color, they can change font size, they can change contrast. It has separate audio description tracks that will play in time with the video. So there isn't like trying to sync anything. It will just do it for you. Same for an interactive transcript where it'll list the transcript out below the image and have a cursor that follows along with the spoken word. Kind of same thing as captions, but it's a separate window for those who might find that more useful. Um, some people with cognitive disabilities find that easier to digest. Um, Other times, people just find it easier to find that because then they can also copy paste the text from there. So a lot of options that you're not going to get from any other player. But as I said, alternatives are limited. You have Vimeo and other places like that, and by and large, they're either equivalent to or worse than YouTube. So you know, just be aware of the challenges there, and in some cases, you might need to present alternatives to people. Last thing I want to talk about with video audio is press conferences and live events. So the big thing with these is you want to hire a captioning service. So the reason for that is because again, a captioner is able to provide other information that's relevant, uh, such as audio from a video or speaker names, proper grammar, that kind of thing. It's not something someone who's not trained can do. When I first did a presentation like this back in like 2020 or something, I mentioned, captioners are typing like 130, 140 words per minute. That captioner let me know, like, no, it's closer to like 220, 230. So, you know, they're typing well above the general average speed of most people, and they have special software or stenographer keyboards for that kind of thing. So you really need a professional to handle this. You should consider automated captions as a backup, again, because it's going to lack some ability to communicate everything on screen. Um, they're not going to be 100% accurate. They're not going to be as accurate as a captioning service. So if you don't have a captioner, or if you're like setting up like a short meeting with people in your office or something, or if it's like with a particular group, in some cases, yeah, okay, automated's good. It's better than nothing. So if you can't get a captioning service for whatever reason, either due to money or time, or God forbid they didn't show up, use the automated captions. It's better than nothing. It's just the captioning service is generally going to be your best option. Second thing is provide your accessible materials ahead of time. The reason I send out my slide deck ahead of time is for this reason, is because it gives people the ability to follow along, B, make sure that they have the information available to them. If I miss describing something on screen, they can still get to it on here. And then also making sure that I use specific language again to match up with what's on screen, that I'm talking about the examples on screen. What's most relevant here? What is this link going to? I was alerted to an issue with this slide deck. I didn't realize I had thought the links were color contrast compliant. They were when I tested this a while ago, but it's been a while and I either screwed something up as I made changes this time around. So you'll be getting a new version when I send out the recording that is color contrast compliant. So thank you to that person who let me know. Um, but that's the kind of thing is that we need to get into that habit and making sure again to make things better for people. There are tools out there to run it in time in an accessible manner. Um, uh, there is I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but it's uh, Scribe for Meetings, I think it's called, or something along those lines, that will read on screen and then present it in an HTML format for users. So there's tools like that are also available, but providing the materials ahead of time is an easy way to make sure that everyone's getting everything you need. The final note about sign language interpretation, because we get a fair amount of questions about this. Uh, it's a must-have on press conferences. You know, because your press conferences are talking to the widest audience possible. You want to make sure everyone's getting that information. Um, it's especially needed because while they have captioning, captioning might be done through another vendor. Like the news channels are going to have their own captioning. You're not going to be providing captioning to them. So having that sign language interpretation is critical to make sure that your information is getting across. Uh, and in general, from my understanding with uh, my coworkers who are deaf of hard of hearing, having both options is the best solution. For your webinars, you want to offer it. Again, it's kind of like the captioning service. You want to have the captioning available. I will mention that sometimes your services you're concerned about cost or whatever, so you want to make sure you're offering it. You have to have it if someone requests it. Um, in general, it's good to have for new subjects. If you're launching a new webinar or new series, you might want to consider having an interpreter just available for general purposes. If you do so, or if it's requested, make sure that when you set up your webinar or your meeting, that you pin or spotlight the interpreter's feed so that they are the primary person on screen. Um, and at minimum, your camera view should be split evenly. Part of that is on the user. Places like Zoom or Teams allow the ability for the user to change the view to something like side-by-side view in Zoom, and then they can adjust the size of individual windows. But at minimum, you want to make sure that the interpreter is the most visible. In some cases, you might need to consider turning your own video feed off so that the interpreter is getting the screen real estate. It's primarily needed for live events. Recorded media, because you have that option of making the captions 100% accurate, it's not considered a requirement. But if you go ahead and do it, no one's going to fault you, and most people are going to praise you. So keep that in mind. It's again offering another option for users to get, make sure they get the information in the way that works best for them. So finally, we have some resources available to you guys. W3C has a design guide at their Web Accessibility Initiative. Um, that design guide goes through a lot of what we talked about today, goes into some more detail about specifics for like publications and video and such. Um, there's Cadet, which is a free captioning tool from the National Center for Accessible Media. I've used that. It's can be a little bit tricky to set up because it's browser based, so you have to change a couple settings to make it work. But once you've done it, it works really well. If you have questions about using it, please reach out. I have used it before. I can guide you through how to work with it. Section 508.gov, which is the federal government's website for accessibility in Section 508 in the government, has a content creation guide. It covers Word, PDFs, PowerPoint, Excel, video, audio creation, social media. So pretty much any kind of publication, it's going to have some guidelines for you. We have our own previous webinars that we post on our website. We also have a quick card on social media. So just some quick tips like what we've talked about today. You can take a quick look at, just kind of a checklist or a reminder for you as you're going through your day and making your posts, that you're like, oh yeah, I need to make sure to add alt text before I click post. Got it. If you want to learn more about audio description, the American Council of the Blind has a project, audio description project, that is essentially a catalog of the audio descriptions for various TV shows and film. I think they have theater too. Um, but they also have guidelines for good audio description, how to handle it, how to make good narrative language to make sure that, again, what you're saying matches what's on screen. And so that users are getting that, because there isn't really, outside of that, there isn't really any kind of other standard for audio description. With that, do people have any questions? Feel free to raise your hand, post in chat, post in Q&A. I'll make sure I'm trying to address everyone's concerns. Give it a minute or so. If you don't, or if you think of something after today, again, please reach out. You can use our email that you should have gotten the registration from, but if not, I'm going to put in chat quick, which is mdod.nva@maryland.gov. You can reach out to speak with us. I would love a more in-depth with charts and extensive tables. Okay, yeah, sure. Not something I can cover in more in a couple minutes, but in general, with charts and tables, they can be challenging. With most tables, you are needing to label, you need to put, the usual things you'll hear about like table headings, column headings, row headings. With charts and such, a lot of it comes down to how you're presenting it. So HTML and PDF probably going to be your best ways because you can try to set it up so that you can read the actual numbers on the X and Y axis. You can communicate to users that this, that is like PDFs, you can tag them in that order. HTML, you can set it up so that it reads in that order and then reads the data points. But it is still going to be challenging in that there isn't really a good way to make those comparison points vivid. Some of that you have to do in a text summary outside of the table or chart. There has been work done. I believe, I think it's SAS has created a tool for their things. You do have to, in order to create one, you have to buy their tool, but users on the other end can just download the free extension, and it will show the chart with by using an octave, piano octave, so you can hear comparison points in that. But outside of those methods, there isn't really a great way to work with them. Very extensive tables, like with multiple subheadings and such. W3C does have a guide for how to code those in HTML, and that's probably your best way to handle it. I can try and find the link quick, or actually, I'll send it out with the recording since we're only got a couple minutes left. Make sure you guys have that link for a table guide, but trying to post that in a single image or something is not going to work. So that's why I said have the image of it, but make sure that the image links to somewhere else they can get to it. So I will make sure to try and get that information to you. And I will consider also adding that to, actually, I will add it to the list of things to talk about at the uh, descriptive text or alternate text webinar I'm putting together. So thank you for that question. Thank you. Any other questions? I don't see any, and we are at 2 o'clock exactly. So thank you, everyone. Again, if you have questions, if you think of something afterwards, please reach out. My email is in the chat, mdod.nva@maryland.gov. You can email us there, and we'll try and answer your questions for you. As I said, this webinar was recorded. It'll be posted on our YouTube channel. Uh, and we have plenty of other resources available for any of these topics from our website. So, and there's plenty of other people who've done the same thing. So there's a lot of free resources out there on this. So thank you, everyone. And I hope you have a good afternoon.